The snow was falling harder now, and Clara knew she couldn't walk much further. Her worn boots had holes that let the cold bite at her feet. The heavy bag on her shoulder held everything she owned in the world, which wasn't much anymore. She had been walking for 2 days through these mountains. People in the last town told her about a man who lived up here alone with his children. They said his wife had died, and he might need help. Clara didn't know if it was true, but she had nowhere else to go. Her husband, Tom, had died 6 months ago in a terrible accident at the mine. The heavy rocks had fallen on him and 3 other men. None of them came home that day. Clara still remembered the sound of the mine boss knocking on her door with his hat in his hands and that look in his eyes. After Tom died, the bills kept coming. The doctor bills from when Tom was sick before the accident, the money they owed for their little house, the debt from the store where they bought food. Clara worked as hard as she could, washing clothes for other people and cleaning houses. But it wasn't enough. Never enough. Last week, the bank man came to her door. He said she had to leave the house. He said someone else would live there now. Clara begged him for more time, but he just shook his head. She packed her few things and left the only home she had known since marrying Tom. Now she was here in these wild mountains, looking for a man she had never met. The wind was getting stronger and the snow was piling up fast. Clara pulled her thin coat tighter around her body. She had to find that cabin soon, or she might not survive the night. Through the thick snow, she saw a small light ahead. Her heart jumped with hope. As she got closer, she could see it was a log cabin with smoke coming from the chimney. There were animal skins hanging on the porch and wood stacked high against the walls. Clara walked up the wooden steps, her legs shaking from cold and fear. She raised her hand to knock on the door, but suddenly felt dizzy. The world started spinning around her. She had not eaten much in 2 days, and the cold mountain air made it hard to breathe. The door opened just as Clara fell forward onto the porch. A tall man with dark hair and a thick beard caught her before she hit the ground. He had strong arms and gentle eyes, though his face looked surprised and worried. "What in the world?" he said, helping her stand up. "Miss, are you all right?" Clara looked up at him, trying to catch her breath. Are you Jacob Whitmore?" "I am," he said, still holding her steady. "Who's asking?" Before Clara could answer, 3 small faces appeared behind the man. A girl who looked about 12 years old stood next to a boy around 8. Behind them, a tiny girl with messy blonde hair peeked out, her thumb in her mouth. "Papa, who is she?" the older girl asked. Her dress was dirty and her hair needed brushing. "I don't know yet, Lily," Jacob said. He looked back at Clara. "Miss, you're half frozen. Come inside before you get sick." Clara wanted to explain everything right away, but her teeth were chattering too hard to speak clearly. Jacob helped her into the warm cabin. The inside was simple but cozy, with a big stone fireplace and wooden furniture that looked like it was made by hand. The boy brought her a blanket while Jacob poured hot coffee into a metal cup. "Here," he said. "Drink this slowly." Clara wrapped her cold fingers around the warm cup and took a small sip. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it felt wonderful going down her throat. "Now then," Jacob said, sitting down across from her. "What brings you all the way up here in weather like this?" Clara looked at the 3 children watching her with curious eyes. The little one had come closer and was staring at Clara's bag. "My name is Clara Murphy," she began, her voice still shaky. "My husband died 6 months ago. I lost my home and I have nowhere to go." She paused, trying to find the right words. "Someone in town said you might need help with your children." Jacob's face became serious. He glanced at his children, then back at Clara. "What exactly did they tell you?" Clara felt her face get warm with embarrassment. "They said your wife had passed, and you were raising the children alone. They thought maybe you could use someone to help cook and clean and take care of things." The older girl, Lily, stepped forward. "We don't need taking care of," she said, her voice sharp. "We take care of ourselves just fine." "Lily," Jacob said quietly but not unkindly. "Let me talk." Clara looked around the cabin and saw dishes piled up in the kitchen area. The children's clothes were patched and worn. The little girl's hair was tangled, and all of them looked like they could use a good meal and a warm bath. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Outside, the wind howled through the trees and snow hit the windows like tiny stones. "I won't lie to you, Miss Murphy," he finally said. "Life up here is hard. I hunt and trap animals to sell their fur. I grow what food I can in the summer. But taking care of 3 children and doing all the work, it's been difficult since my wife Mary died 2 years ago." The little girl walked over to her father and climbed onto his lap. "I miss Mama," she whispered. Jacob hugged her close. "I know, little Rose. We all do." Clara's heart ached watching them. She could see the love between this father and his children, but also how much they all needed help. "The thing is," Jacob continued, "I can't pay much in money. Life up here isn't about money anyway. It's about staying warm, staying fed, and staying alive through the winter. If you're looking for an easy life, this isn't it." Clara shook her head. "I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for a place to belong." Jacob studied her face carefully. "Can you cook? Can you sew? Can you handle being alone with the children when I have to go hunting for days at a time?" "I can learn," Clara said. "I'm not afraid of hard work." 8-year-old Ben spoke up for the first time. "Can you make pancakes? Papa burns them every time." Despite everything, Clara smiled. "Yes, I can make pancakes." Jacob stood up, gently moving little Rose to his other arm. He walked to the window and looked out at the storm. "The snow's getting worse," he said. "Even if you wanted to leave, you can't travel in this weather." He turned back to Clara. "Here's what I'm thinking. You stay here through the winter. Help me with the children, the cooking, the housework. In return, you have a warm place to sleep and food to eat. When spring comes, we'll see how things worked out. If it's good for everyone, maybe we can make it permanent." Clara felt tears start to form in her eyes. "You would do that for a stranger?" "You're not a stranger anymore," Jacob said simply. "And these children need a woman's care. I can teach them to hunt and fish and work with their hands. But there are things a mother teaches that I just can't." Lily crossed her arms. "She's not our mother." Jacob looked at his daughter with understanding eyes. "No, she's not your mama. No one will ever replace your mama. But Clara could be someone who cares about you and helps take care of you. Would that be so bad?" Lily didn't answer, but she didn't look as angry as before. "What do you say, Miss Murphy?" Jacob asked. "Are you willing to give mountain life a try?" Clara looked around the cabin. It wasn't much, but it was warm and dry. The children needed her even if they didn't want to admit it. And Jacob seemed like a good man who was doing his best in a difficult situation. She thought about her other choices, which were none at all. She could try to make it back to town in this storm and probably freeze to death. Or she could stay here and try to build a new life with these people who needed help just as much as she did. "Yes," Clara said. "I'll stay." Little Rose climbed down from her father's lap and walked over to Clara. She held up a worn cloth doll. "This is Molly," she said shyly. "She doesn't have any hair because Ben cut it off." "Hey," Ben protested. "I was trying to make her look like Papa." Clara took the little doll carefully. "Well, maybe we can find some yarn and give Molly new hair. Would you like that?" Rose nodded eagerly. "Can you make it yellow like mine?" "I think we can manage that," Clara said. Jacob watched this exchange, with something that might have been relief on his face. "Lily, can you show Clara where she can put her things? She can sleep in the small room next to yours." Lily nodded slowly. "Come on," she said to Clara. "I'll show you." As Clara followed Lily through the cabin, she caught Jacob's eye. He nodded at her, a look of gratitude and hope in his expression. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside, the little log cabin, something new was beginning. A woman who had lost everything was about to discover that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you really need. Clara didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if the children would accept her, or if she could handle the hard mountain life. But for the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt hope. As she unpacked her few belongings in the small room that would be her new home, Clara heard Jacob talking quietly to his children by the fire. She heard little Rose laugh at something Ben said. She heard Lily asking her father if Clara really knew how to make yarn hair for dolls. These weren't her children, and this wasn't the life she had planned. But maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what she needed. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what they needed too. The mountain man had opened his door to a desperate woman with nowhere else to go. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple act of kindness was about to change all their lives forever. 3 weeks had passed since Clara arrived at the mountain cabin, and she was beginning to understand what Jacob meant when he said life here was hard. Every morning started before sunrise, and every day brought new challenges she had never imagined. The first thing Clara learned was that mountain winters were nothing like the winters she knew in town. The snow piled up so high it covered the windows on the bottom floor. The wind howled through the trees with a sound that made her think of wild animals. Sometimes the cold was so bitter that just stepping outside to get firewood made her face sting like she had been slapped. But inside the cabin, things were slowly getting better. Clara had spent her first week just trying to understand how everything worked. The cooking stove was different from any she had used before. The well outside froze every few days and had to be thawed with hot water. The children had their own ways of doing things, and they didn't like it when she tried to change them. Lily was the hardest to win over. The 12-year-old girl had been taking care of her younger brothers and sisters since their mother died. She knew how to cook simple meals, how to mend clothes with rough stitches, and how to keep little Rose from crying when she missed her mama. Lily didn't trust Clara, and made it clear she thought they had been doing fine without help. "I've been making breakfast for 2 years," Lily said one morning when Clara tried to help with the pancakes. "I know how Papa likes them." Clara stepped back and watched Lily work. The girl was competent, but the pancakes came out lumpy and burned on the bottom. When Jacob ate them, he smiled and said they were delicious, but Clara could see him chewing carefully around the burned parts. "You do a good job, Lily," Clara said honestly. "Your family is lucky to have you taking care of them." Lily looked surprised. She had expected Clara to criticize her cooking or try to take over. Instead, Clara asked if she could learn Lily's method so she could help when Lily was busy with other things. Slowly, very slowly, Lily began to warm up to Clara. It started when Clara showed her how to test the pan temperature by sprinkling water on it. If the water danced and sizzled, the pan was ready. If it just sat there, it needed more heat. "My grandmother taught me that trick," Clara explained. "She said cooking is like learning to listen. You listen to the sounds the food makes, and it tells you what it needs." 8-year-old Ben was easier to please. He was hungry all the time and thought anyone who could make food appear was wonderful. He followed Clara around the cabin, asking endless questions about everything she did. "Why do you put salt in the bread?" he wanted to know. "How do you make the fire burn just right for cooking? Can you really fix Ben's torn coat with just needle and thread?" Clara answered every question patiently. She had always liked curious children, and Ben reminded her of her younger brother who had died of fever when they were both small. Little Rose was the sweetest surprise. The 4-year-old had been shy at first, hiding behind her father's legs whenever Clara spoke to her. But children that age can't stay shy for long, especially when they're getting the attention they crave. It started when Clara brushed Rose's tangled hair. The little girl's blonde curls were so knotted that it took an hour of gentle work to get them smooth. But Clara was patient, telling Rose stories about princesses and talking animals while she worked. "My mama used to brush my hair," Rose said quietly. "I bet she did," Clara replied. "I bet she loved your pretty curls." "Do you think she can see me from heaven?" Clara's hands stilled for a moment. "I think mothers always watch over their children no matter where they are." Rose seemed satisfied with this answer. From that day on, she appeared at Clara's side, every morning with her brush ready for her hair to be fixed. Jacob watched all of this happening with quiet approval. He didn't say much, but Clara could tell he was relieved to see his children getting the care they needed. He left early most mornings to check his traps or hunt for fresh meat. Sometimes he was gone for 2 or 3 days at a time. Will you be all right alone with them? He asked Clara before his first long hunting trip. We'll be fine, Clara assured him, though she felt nervous about being responsible for the children by herself. That first time Jacob was away, everything went wrong. Ben got sick with a stomachache that had him crying all night. Rose woke up, screaming from nightmares. Lily tried to help but got frustrated when Rose wouldn't stop crying, which made everyone more upset. Clara walked the floor with Rose in her arms, singing lullabies her own mother had sung to her. She made Ben weak tea and sat with him until the pain went away. She talked to Lily about how hard it must be to feel responsible for everyone all the time. It's scary when Papa goes away, Lily admitted. What if something happens to him? What if he doesn't come back? Clara understood that fear. She had felt the same way every day when Tom went to work in the dangerous mine. Your Papa is smart and careful, Clara told Lily. He knows these mountains better than anyone, but it's natural to worry about people we love. When Jacob returned 2 days later with fresh deer meat, he found his children calm and happy. Ben ran to show him a new game Clara had taught him with buttons and string. Rose presented him with a drawing she had made of the whole family, including Clara. Lily helped Clara prepare a hot meal from the deer meat Jacob had brought home. How did everything go? Jacob asked Clara while the children played by the fire. We learned a lot about each other, Clara said. They're good children, Jacob. You should be proud. Jacob looked at his children, then back at Clara. They seem happier, more settled. Clara nodded. Children need routine and attention. They need to know someone is taking care of the details so they can just be children. As winter deepened, the little family fell into comfortable patterns. Clara learned to cook venison in 10 different ways. She taught the children their letters by writing words in the ash from the fireplace. She showed them how to make their beds properly and why it was important to keep their clothes clean and mended. The children learned to trust Clara's gentle authority. When Ben got too rowdy and knocked over a pot of soup, Clara made him help clean up the mess and start over. But she didn't yell or make him feel ashamed. When Rose had accidents during the night, Clara changed her bedding without fussing and helped her wash up. Even Lily began to relax her tight control over everything. She let Clara take over most of the cooking and mending. In return, Clara asked for Lily's help with decisions about the children and made sure she knew her opinions mattered. What do you think Rose needs most right now? Clara would ask. Or how do you think we should handle it when Ben doesn't want to do his chores? Jacob noticed the changes in his children, but there were changes in him too. He started taking more time in the evenings to sit with his family instead of falling into bed exhausted. He listened to Clara read stories to the children. He helped Ben with a wooden toy he was trying to carve. One evening, a terrible blizzard hit the mountains. The wind shook the cabin so hard it sounded like it might fall apart. Snow piled up against the windows until they couldn't see outside at all. The family was trapped inside together for 4 days. At first, everyone was restless and irritable. The children fought over small things. Jacob paced around the cabin like a caged animal. Clara worried about their supplies lasting if the storm continued. But by the second day, something shifted. They began to work together in new ways. Clara taught the children card games her grandmother had played. Jacob told stories about his own childhood in these mountains. Lily showed everyone how to weave grass into small baskets. Rose climbed onto Jacob's lap one evening and fell asleep while he talked. Ben leaned against Clara's shoulder as she read from Jacob's one book, a collection of adventure stories. Lily sat close to the fire, working on a shirt she was making for her little sister. "This is nice," Rose mumbled sleepily. Clara looked around the small, crowded cabin. 4 months ago, she had been alone and desperate. Now she was part of something that felt almost like a real family. When the storm finally ended, they all worked together to dig their way out. Jacob and Ben shoveled snow while Clara and the girls prepared a celebration meal. As they sat around the table that night, eating Clara's venison stew and fresh bread, Jacob raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To making it through our first big storm together," he said. "To Clara teaching us new songs," Rose added. "To Papa bringing home fresh meat even in the snow," Ben said. "To everyone helping each other," Lily said quietly. Clara felt tears in her eyes as she raised her own cup. To finding a family when I didn't expect one. They drank their coffee and milk, and for the first time since she had arrived, Clara truly felt like she belonged here. These weren't her children by birth, and Jacob wasn't her husband. But they were becoming her family by choice, day by day, in all the small ways that mattered. Outside, the mountain wind still howled through the trees, but inside the cabin, 5 people who had started as strangers were learning to be a family. They were learning each other's rhythms, each other's needs, each other's ways of showing love. Winter was far from over, but Clara no longer felt afraid of it. She had found her place in this wild, beautiful, difficult world. She had found people who needed her just as much as she needed them. And in the quiet moments before sleep, when she listened to the children breathing peacefully in their beds and Jacob moving quietly around the cabin, spring came slowly to the mountains, and with it came new hope and new challenges. The snow began to melt, creating rushing streams that ran down the mountainsides like liquid silver. The air smelled different now, fresh and green and full of possibilities. Clara had been with Jacob and his children for nearly 5 months. What had started as a desperate arrangement for survival had become something much deeper and more complicated. She could see it in the way little Rose ran to her when she scraped her knee, seeking comfort from Clara instead of her father. She could see it in how Ben asked Clara to help him with his letters, trusting her to be patient when he struggled. Even Lily had begun to rely on Clara's judgment about household matters and her brothers and sister. But most confusing of all, Clara could see it in the way Jacob looked at her sometimes. When he thought she wasn't watching, his eyes would follow her movements around the cabin. When she laughed at something the children said, she would catch him smiling in a way that made her heart beat faster. Clara tried not to think about these feelings too much. Jacob had offered her a practical arrangement, help with his children in exchange for a home. He had never mentioned anything about deeper feelings or a real marriage. She reminded herself that she was still officially just helping through the winter and spring meant it was time to make permanent decisions. The question came up one morning when Jacob was preparing to leave for a longer hunting trip. The winter had been hard on the wild animals, and he needed to go deeper into the mountains to find enough game to trade for supplies they would need. "I'll be gone for at least a week," he told Clara as he packed his gear. "Maybe longer if the hunting is difficult." Clara nodded, but inside she felt worried. A week seemed like a long time to be responsible for the children all by herself. "Clara," Jacob said, hesitating as if he wanted to say something important. "When I come back, we need to talk about what happens next, about whether you want to stay permanently or if you'd prefer to make other arrangements now that spring is here." Clara felt her stomach tighten with nervousness. "What do you think would be best?" Jacob looked at her for a long moment, and Clara saw something in his eyes that looked like longing, but then he looked away and picked up his rifle. "We'll talk when I get back," he said. "Take care of the children. They love you, you know." After Jacob left, Clara threw herself into spring cleaning. She and Lily worked together to air out bedding that had been closed up all winter. They scrubbed the floors and washed the windows. Clara taught Rose and Ben how to plant seeds in the small garden behind the cabin. The children seemed happier and more energetic as the weather warmed up. Ben spent hours outside, exploring and playing games Clara had taught him. Rose picked wildflowers and brought them to Clara in small, messy bouquets. Lily helped Clara plan meals and talked about things she wanted to learn, like how to make her own dresses and how to preserve fruit for next winter. Everything was going well until the 4th day after Jacob left. That morning, Ben woke up with a fever and chills that scared Clara more than anything that had happened all winter. Ben was usually the most energetic of the 3 children. He was always moving, always talking, always getting into something. But now he lay in his bed, too weak to sit up, burning with fever and shivering at the same time. Clara had helped sick people before, but she had always had other adults around to share the responsibility. Now she was alone with 3 children, one of them seriously ill, and Jacob was somewhere deep in the mountains where she couldn't reach him. She made Ben drink water even when he didn't want to, She bathed his face with cool cloths to bring down the fever. She sat with him through the night when he was too uncomfortable to sleep. Lily helped by taking care of Rose and keeping her quiet so Ben could rest. But on the second day, Ben got worse instead of better. His fever climbed higher and he started saying things that didn't make sense. He called for his mother, who had been dead for 2 years. He thought Clara was someone else and pushed her away when she tried to help him drink water. Clara had never been so frightened. She knew children could die from fevers like this. She knew Ben needed more help than she could give him. But the nearest doctor was a full day's ride away, down dangerous mountain paths she didn't know how to navigate. "What should we do?" Lily asked, her voice small and scared. Clara looked at Lily's worried face and made a decision. "You and Rose are going to help me take care of Ben here. We're going to fight this fever together and we're going to win." For 3 days and nights, Clara barely left Ben's side. She gave him cool baths when his temperature spiked. She made him drink herb tea that Jacob had shown her how to prepare. She told him stories when he was awake and sang to him when he was delirious with fever. Lily proved herself to be remarkably mature and helpful. She took over all the cooking and cleaning without being asked. She kept Rose entertained and out of the way. She even helped Clara care for Ben, bringing clean cloths and fresh water whenever they were needed. Rose seemed to understand that something serious was happening. She stayed quiet and well-behaved, even though Clara could tell she was scared. Sometimes Clara would find the little girl sitting next to Ben's bed, patting his hand and whispering to him about the flowers she had picked. On the third night, Ben's fever broke. Clara was dozing in the chair next to his bed when she heard him speak clearly for the first time in days. "Clara, I'm thirsty." Clara's eyes flew open. She felt Ben's forehead and found it cool and damp with sweat. The dangerous heat was gone. "Oh, thank goodness," she whispered, tears running down her face. She helped Ben drink some water and watched him settle into what looked like real sleep instead of the restless, feverish tossing he had been doing. Jacob returned the next morning to find Ben sitting up in bed, weak but clearly recovering. Rose was curled up next to her brother, showing him the pictures she had drawn while he was sick. Lily was making breakfast, and Clara was hanging clean sheets outside to dry. "What happened?" Jacob asked, dropping his pack and going straight to Ben's bedside. Clara told him everything: the fever, the long nights, how scared she had been, how Lily and Rose had helped. Jacob listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious, as he understood how close they had come to losing Ben. When Clara finished the story, Jacob was quiet for a long time. He checked Ben over carefully, feeling his forehead and listening to his breathing. "You saved his life," Jacob said finally, looking at Clara with an expression she had never seen before. "If you had panicked, if you had tried to take him down, the mountain in that condition, he might have died." Clara felt her knees go weak with delayed reaction to everything that had happened. "I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't bear to lose him." Jacob stood up and walked over to where Clara was standing. He put his hands on her shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. "Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "these children aren't just your responsibility anymore. They're part of you. I can see it in everything you do, everything you are with them." Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "And you're part of them," Jacob continued. "Ben called for you when he was sick, not for me. Rose looks to you for comfort. Lily trusts your judgment about things I never thought she'd trust anyone with." He paused, still looking into her eyes. "They're not the only ones who have come to depend on you." Clara's heart began to beat faster. "Jacob!" "I know this wasn't supposed to be about feelings," Jacob said. "I know I offered you a practical arrangement, nothing more. But Clara, He stopped, struggling with words. Clara waited, hardly daring to breathe. "I haven't felt this way about anyone since Mary," Jacob said finally. "I didn't think I could. I didn't think I should. But watching you care for my children, watching you become part of this family, Clara, I think I'm falling in love with you." Clara felt tears start in her eyes again, but these were different tears than the ones she had cried over Ben's sickness. "I love them too," she whispered. "All of them, even you." though I tried not to let myself feel it. Jacob smiled then, the first real smile Clara had seen from him since the day she arrived at his door. "So what do we do about it?" he asked. Before Clara could answer, Rose appeared at Jacob's elbow. "Papa, are you going to marry Clara so she can be our real mama?" Jacob and Clara looked at each other, then down at the little girl with her blonde curls and serious blue eyes. "Would you like that, Rose?" Clara asked gently. Rose nodded eagerly. Then Ben would have someone to take care of him when he gets sick again, and Lily could learn to make pretty dresses, and I could have someone to brush my hair every day forever. From across the room, Ben called out weakly, "And Clara makes better pancakes than anybody." Lily appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "If Clara marries Papa, does that mean she'll stay with us always, even when we grow up?" Jacob looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. Clara thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The grief of losing Tom, the desperation that had driven her up the mountain, the gradual way she had come to love these children and this difficult, beautiful life. Most of all, she thought. The morning Jacob proposed to Clara properly, he went down to his knees right there in the cabin kitchen while the children watched with wide eyes and barely contained excitement. He didn't have a fancy ring, but he had carved a simple wooden band with their initials inside a heart. "Clara Murphy," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness Clara could see in his eyes. "Will you marry me and be a mother to my children and a wife to me in truth?" Clara's answer was yes before he finished asking. The children cheered and danced around the kitchen, and little Rose announced that she would pick all the flowers for the wedding. Ben wanted to know if they could have a big cake, and Lily asked if Clara would teach her to sew a new dress for the occasion. But their happiness was interrupted 3 days later by a knock at the door that changed everything. Clara was hanging laundry behind the cabin when she heard Jacob talking to someone on the front porch. The voice that answered him was unfamiliar, rough and demanding. Something about the tone made Clara stop what she was doing and listen carefully. "Name's Walter Higgins," the stranger was saying. "I'm looking for a woman named Clara Murphy. Heard she might be staying up here." Clara's blood went cold. Walter Higgins was the man her late husband Tom had borrowed money from to pay for his medicine when he was sick. The same man who had come to her door after Tom died, demanding payment she didn't have. She had managed to avoid him when she left town, but somehow he had found her. "There's no one here by that name," Jacob said calmly. But Clara could hear the tension in his voice. "Don't lie to me, mountain man," Higgins snarled. "I tracked her up here. Woman owes me money and I mean to collect it." Clara took a deep breath and walked around to the front of the cabin. She couldn't let Jacob lie for her or get in trouble because of her debts. "I'm Clara Murphy," she said, stepping onto the porch. "What do you want?" Higgins was a thin, mean-looking man with small dark eyes and clothes that had seen better days. He looked Clara up and down with obvious disapproval. "Finally," he said, "you owe me $200 for the money I lent your husband before he died. I've been looking for you for months." Clara felt sick. $200 might as well have been $2,000. It was more money than she could earn in years of washing and cleaning. "I don't have that kind of money," she said honestly. "I never did." "Then you'll come back to town with me," Higgins said. "Work it off doing whatever work I can find for you. Shouldn't take more than a few years." Clara knew what kind of work men like Higgins found for women who owed them money. The thought made her feel sick and frightened. Jacob stepped closer to Clara, his presence solid and protective. "She's not going anywhere with you." Higgins laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Says who? You? She owes me money, legal and binding. I got the papers to prove it." He pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. Clara recognized her late husband's handwriting on the signature line. "This doesn't prove anything about Clara owing you money," Jacob said, looking at the paper. "This is between you and her dead husband. Law says a wife is responsible for her husband's debts," Higgins said with a nasty smile. "She comes with me or I bring the sheriff up here to collect her." Clara watched Jacob's face grow hard and angry. She had seen him upset before, but never like this, ever like. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. How much? Jacob asked quietly. $200 plus interest for the time I've spent looking for her, Higgins said. Call it $250. Clara gasped. Jacob, no, you can't. That's all the money you've saved, probably more than you have. Jacob ignored her. If I pay you, you leave her alone forever. No more coming around, no more threats. Higgins considered this. Cash money? Right now? Right now. Clara grabbed Jacob's arm. Please don't do this. I'll figure out another way. Jacob looked at her with gentle eyes. There is no other way, Clara, and I'm not letting him take you anywhere. He went into the cabin and came back with a metal box Clara had seen him keep in the bedroom. Inside were bills and coins, the money Jacob had been saving for years to buy more land, to expand his farm, to give his children a better future. Clara watched him count out every dollar he had, and her heart broke. This was money Jacob had earned through hard work and sacrifice, money that was supposed to secure his family's future, and he was giving it all away for her. Here, Jacob said, handing the money to Higgins. $250. Now get off my land and don't come back. Higgins counted the money carefully, then tucked it into his coat. Pleasure doing business with you, he said with a mocking tip of his hat. Enjoy your expensive woman. After Higgins rode away, Clara sat down on the porch steps and cried, not just because of the money, though that was devastating enough. She cried because she felt like she had brought danger and trouble to the family she was supposed to protect. Jacob sat down beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. It's all right, he said. It's over now. It's not all right. Clara sobbed. That was all your money, all your plans for the future. And Clara, Jacob said firmly, look at me. She raised her tear-stained face to his. You are my future, he said. You and the children. Money can be earned again. Land can be bought again, but I could never replace you. The children, who had been hiding inside during the confrontation with Higgins, came out to see what was happening. Rose climbed onto Clara's lap, and Ben leaned against her shoulder. Why are you sad? Rose asked. Did the mean man hurt you? No. Sweetheart, Clara said, wiping her eyes. I'm sad because your papa had to give away his money to help me. Lily, who had been quiet during the whole incident, spoke up. Good, she said fiercely. That man was scary and Papa was brave to send him away. But the money, Clara started. We don't need money to be happy, Ben said simply. We have each other. Clara looked at these children who had accepted her so completely, who saw her troubles as their troubles and her protection as worth any sacrifice. She looked at Jacob, who had given up his life savings without hesitation to keep her safe. I don't deserve you, she whispered. Yes, you do, Jacob said. We all deserve each other. 2 weeks later, they were married by a traveling preacher who came through the mountains. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Lily had helped her sew. Rose scattered wildflower petals, and Ben held the wooden rings Jacob had carved for both of them. It wasn't a fancy wedding, but it was perfect. As Clara promised to love and honor Jacob for the rest of her life, she knew she was making the easiest promise she had ever made. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Jacob sat together on the porch, looking up at the stars that seemed close enough to touch in the clear mountain air. Do you regret it? Clara asked quietly. Giving up so much for me? Jacob took her hand and turned the simple wooden ring on her finger. Clara, before you came here, I was just surviving, getting through each day, taking care of the children but not really living. You brought life back into this house. You brought joy and laughter and hope. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The money I saved was supposed to buy security for my children, but you've given them something worth more than money. You've given them a mother who loves them, a home that feels safe and happy, and a future that looks bright. Clara leaned against Jacob's shoulder, feeling more content than she had ever imagined possible. Besides, Jacob added with a smile in his voice. I'm pretty good at earning money. Give me a few years and I'll have that savings built up again. We'll build it up together, Clara corrected. All of us. This is our family now, our future to build together. Above them, the mountain wind whispered through the pine trees, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate. Inside, the cabin, 3 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. Clara Murphy was now Clara Whitmore, wife and mother and partner in building a life in these wild, beautiful mountains. The desperate woman who had collapsed on Jacob's doorstep 6 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who had found her strength, her purpose, and her home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work to be done, new dreams to chase. But tonight, surrounded by love and promise, Clara knew she was exactly where she belonged. 1 year later, Clara stood in her garden, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching her family work together in the warm summer sunshine. It had been the happiest year of her life, full of changes and growth that she never could have imagined. When she first knocked on Jacob's door, the garden was twice the size it had been the previous year. Jacob had cleared more land and built raised beds for vegetables. Clara had planted herbs and flowers alongside the practical crops, making their little homestead both beautiful and useful. Rose helped by watering the plants with a small watering can Jacob had made for her. Ben's job was to watch for rabbits and deer that might eat their vegetables. Lily, now 13, was becoming a young woman. She had grown 3 inches over the winter and was learning to cook elaborate meals and sew clothes that looked store-bought. But more importantly, she had learned to trust Clara completely and had started calling her Mama without any prompting or awkwardness. Mama, Lily called from the cabin porch. Should I start the bread for dinner? Yes, please, Clara called back. And remember to let it rise in the warm spot by the stove. Clara smiled every time one of the children called her Mama. It had happened gradually, starting with little Rose, who forgot to be formal when she was tired or upset. Ben had started doing it when he was excited about something. Lily had held out the longest, but one day when Clara was sick with morning sickness from the baby, Lily had brought her tea and patted her shoulder and said, Don't worry, Mama. I'll take care of everything today. The baby was due in the fall, and Clara had never been more excited or more nervous about anything in her life. Jacob was thrilled about having another child, especially one that would be theirs together from birth. The children were all eager to help with their new brother or sister. I hope it's a girl, Rose had announced. Boys are smelly. I hope it's a boy, Ben had countered. Girls are too fussy. Lily just smiled and started sewing tiny clothes. I'll love it no matter what. It is, she said simply. Jacob had been even more protective of Clara since learning about the baby. He insisted on doing the heavy work around the cabin and worried constantly about her health. Clara found his concern both touching and occasionally irritating. I'm having a baby, not dying, she reminded him when he tried to stop her from hanging. Laundry. I know, Jacob said, taking the heavy basket from her hands. But you're precious to me, Clara. All of you are precious to me. I can't help wanting to take care of you. Clara understood his concern. Life in the mountains was hard, and having babies was always risky, even in the best circumstances. But she felt strong and healthy, and the mountain midwife who came to check on her said everything looked normal. More importantly, Clara felt ready for this baby in a way she had never felt ready for anything else in her life. She had a stable home, a loving husband, children who were excited to be big brothers and sister, and skills she had learned over the past year that made her confident she could handle whatever came. The money situation had improved too. Jacob's trapping had been very successful, and they had sold enough furs to replace most of what he had spent on paying off Clara's debt. Clara had also started taking in sewing from other families in the area, using skills she had learned from watching her grandmother. Between Jacob's hunting and trapping, their garden, and Clara's sewing, they were actually prospering. We might be able to buy that extra land next spring, Jacob had told Clara a few weeks earlier. The piece down by the stream where we could run cattle. Clara had been amazed. A year ago, Jacob had given up his life savings for her. Now they were talking about expanding their property and their dreams. "How did you do it?" she had asked. "How did we go from losing everything to having more than we started with?" Jacob had thought about this seriously. "I think it's because we stopped just surviving and started really living. When you're just trying to get through each day, you can't see opportunities or possibilities. But when you have hope and people to build a future with, everything looks different." As Clara watched her family working in the late afternoon sun, she knew exactly what Jacob meant. Ben was carefully stacking firewood, taking pride in making neat, straight piles. Rose was singing to her doll while she helped with small chores. Lily was hanging dish towels on the line, moving with the grace and competence of a young woman. Jacob was repairing the fence around their chicken coop, his movements efficient and sure. Every now and then he would look over at Clara and smile, and she would feel that familiar warmth that came from being truly loved and cared for. This wasn't the life Clara had planned when she married her first husband, Tom. That had been a different dream. Town life, steady wages, maybe children if they could afford them. She had expected comfort and predictability. Instead, she had found something richer and more challenging. Mountain life required constant work and attention. The weather could be brutal, supplies were hard to get, and emergencies had to be handled, without outside help. But it also offered freedoms and rewards that town life never could have given her. Clara loved the way the seasons changed dramatically in the mountains, from the deep snows of winter to the explosive green of spring to the golden warmth of summer. She loved being able to step outside her door and see for miles in every direction. She loved the way her children were growing up strong and capable, learning skills that would serve them their whole lives. Most of all, she loved the deep sense of partnership she had with Jacob. They weren't just husband and wife. They were true partners in building something meaningful together. Every decision was made together. Every challenge was faced together. Every joy was shared. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the family gathered on the front porch for their evening ritual. Jacob would play his harmonica while Clara mended clothes or worked on the baby's quilt. The children would play quiet games or listen to Clara tell stories. Tonight, Rose climbed onto Clara's lap, careful of her growing belly, and leaned back, against her. "Tell us about when you first came here," Rose requested. It was her favorite story. Clara smiled and began the familiar tale. "It was winter, and the snow was falling so hard I could barely see where I was going. I was cold and scared and didn't know what would happen to me. But then Papa opened the door," Ben continued, knowing the story by heart. "And he said I could stay and help take care of you," Clara went on. "And then we all learned to love each other," Lily added softly. "And now we're going to have a new baby," Rose finished with satisfaction. Jacob stopped playing his harmonica and looked at his family with an expression of deep contentment. "And now we have everything we need," he said. Clara looked around at the faces of her children, for they were truly her children now as much as if she had given birth to them herself. She looked at her husband who had saved her life in more ways than he would ever know. She thought about the baby growing inside her, who would be born into this loving, secure family. 2 years ago, Clara had been a desperate widow with nowhere to go and nothing to offer except her willingness to work. She had knocked on Jacob's door expecting nothing more than temporary shelter in exchange for household help. Instead, she had found a home in the deepest sense of the word. Not just a place to live, but a place to belong. Not just people to live with, but people to love and be loved by. Not just work to do, but a purpose and a future to build together. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara felt the baby move inside her and smiled. This child would grow up surrounded by love and security, with older siblings who were already planning to teach him or her everything they knew about mountain life. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked quietly. Clara looked at him. This good man who had opened his door to a stranger and changed both their lives forever. "I'm thinking about how sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you really need." Jacob nodded, understanding completely. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are." "Lucky and grateful," Clara agreed. Inside the cabin, the fire burned. warm and bright, ready to welcome them when they decided to go in. Outside, the mountain wind sang through the pine trees, the same wind that had frightened Clara on her first night here, but now sounded like a lullaby. Clara Whitmore was home. Not just in the little log cabin surrounded by vegetable gardens and chicken coops and splitting firewood. She was home in the arms of her family, in the rhythm of their days, in the dreams they were building together. She had learned that home wasn't a place you found or bought or inherited. Home was something you built day by day with people who chose to love you and whom you chose to love in return. Home was created through shared work and shared dreams, through weathering storms together and celebrating small victories. The desperate woman who had collapsed on Jacob's doorstep was gone, forever, replaced by a wife and mother who knew her worth and her place in the world. Clara had found her strength, her purpose, and most importantly, her family. As they all headed inside for the night, Ben running ahead to bank the fire, Rose skipping beside Lily, Jacob's arm around Clara's shoulders, Clara said a silent prayer of gratitude for the mountain man who had looked at a stranger in need and seen not a burden, but a blessing waiting to unfold.